in the sleepy village of Branscombe, Devon, where the cliffs tumble down to meet the sea and the lanes wind through a patchwork of ancient fields. A poignant encounter unfolded one autumn afternoon in the early 1950s, a ghostly echo of love and loss tied to the Second World War. The rolling hills around Vicarage Hill and Bovey Cross, often cloaked in mist, bore witness to countless stories, but none so tender and haunting as that of Clara Henshaw, a woman gifted with a sensitivity to the unseen and the spectral reunion that would mark her forever. Clara was no stranger to the whispers of the otherworldly. Since childhood, she'd possessed what her grandmother called the sight, a knack for sensing presences others couldn't. Glimpses of figures or flickers of emotion that lingered like faint perfume on the air. She rarely spoke of it, for in a practical village like Branscombe, such talk drew sidelong glances. Clara had learned to live quietly with her gift, tending her small garden near the village square and selling homemade preserves at the weekly market. But the war had changed her life irrevocably. Her husband, Edward Henshaw, a kind-eyed carpenter with a laugh like rolling thunder, had been called up in 1941. They'd met in the summer of 1938 at a dance in Sidmouth. Edward in his best tweed jacket, Clara in a simple blue dress, their first waltz sealing a love that felt as timeless as the sea. But Edward never came home. In 1944, while serving with the Devonshire Regiment in Italy, he was killed during a skirmish near Monte Cassino, his body buried in a distant cemetery beneath a foreign sky. Clara received the telegram on a grey morning, and the world dimmed around her. By 1953, Clara had carved out a solitary life, her grief a quiet companion she carried like a worn shawl. On a crisp October afternoon, she set out for a walk along the road between Vicarage Hill and Bovey Cross, a stretch she often took to clear her mind. The sky was a pale wash of blue, the hedgerows bursting with late blackberries, and the air held the Thames of coming frost. Clara's pace was steady, her thoughts drifting to the past as they so often did, when she noticed a figure approaching in the distance. At first, she thought little of Itern, another villager, perhaps, or a farmer heading to Bovey Cross. But something struck her as odd. She hadn't seen him a moment before, as if he'd appeared from the ether itself. As the man drew closer, Clara's breath caught in her throat. It was Edward, rather, the perfect image of him as he'd been when they first met. He wore the same tweed jacket, its elbows slightly worn, and the grey trousers she'd mended a dozen times before they were wed. His face was just as she remembered those kind eyes, the crook of his smile, the faintest scar above his brow from a boyhood mishap. Yet beneath the familiarity, there was an otherworldly shimmer, a faint translucence to his form, as if he were painted in light rather than flesh. Clara stopped dead, her heart hammering, torn between disbelief and a desperate hope. "Edward," she whispered, her voice trembling on the wind. He smiled, small sad smile that held all the weight of their lost years, and continued toward her, his steps steady but silent on the gravel. Clara's gift told her this was no mere vision. It was him, or some part of him, drawn back to her across the divide of death. She wanted to run to him, to throw her arms around him as she had 1,000 times before, but her feet felt rooted to the earth. As he came within a few yards, she noticed the raincoat draped over his arm, flapping lightly in the breezer raincoat he'd never owned in life, its edges catching the sunlight like a silvery thread. The moment was shattered by the sudden roar of a motorbike approaching from behind. Clara turned instinctively, her eyes following the bike as it sped past, kicking up dust in its wake. The noise jolted her out of her reverie, and when she glanced back to Edward, he was fading, his form dissolving into the air like mist burned off by the sun. All that remained was the edge of his raincoat, still flapping as if caught in a phantom wind. Before it too vanished, leaving the lane empty once more. Clara stood frozen, her hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face as the weight of the encounter settled over her. Edward was gone again, but this time, he'd come to her, if only for a fleeting moment. She never spoke of it publicly, though she confided in her closest friend, Martha, over tea a few days later, her voice breaking as she described the sight of him. It was him, Martha, clear as day. Not as he was in the war, but as he was when we were young, when we had a future. Martha, a pragmatic woman, didn't argue. She'd seen too much in Branscombe to dismiss such things outright. Clara kept the memory close, a bittersweet treasure that warmed her through the lonely winters that followed. She walked the road between Vicarage Hill and Bovey Cross many times after, hoping for another glimpse, but Edward never returned. The story of Clara's encounter slipped into Branscombe's quiet lore, shared in hushed tones by those who knew her. Some said Edward's spirit had come to comfort her, a final farewell from a man who'd loved her beyond the grave. Others thought her grief had conjured him through her psychic gift, a trick of the heart made real. Whatever the truth, the lane between Vicarage Hill and Bovey Cross carries a lingering tenderness now, a place where the living and the lost once met under the vast Devon sky. And for Clara Henshaw, who lived until 1979, the memory of that autumn dave, Edward's smile and the flap of his ghostly raincoat remained a beacon, proof that love, like the ghosts of Branscombe, could endure even the finality of death. Many thanks for treading this tale's dark path. If its chill gripped you, like, follow, subscribe and comment below.